You want to swing wildly at the internet like you've got the new pill in your hand, but you keep getting dead battered. Find the movement you want with NordVPN. They are our protection against terrifying cyber threats and wide-battered geo-blocks. NordVPN will help you get through any rights restrictions so you can watch all the cricket you want. We aren't always happy with the wickets we're on. Sometimes we need a change. NordVPN can switch your virtual location so your IP address is ready to cash in. So if you need to get around the internet's rules, or I suppose in our case laws, select NordVPN. They can help you watch a game on a cheaper stream in another country. Give NordVPN the ball and let them penetrate all your vast internet issues. Because if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. You can also receive a 20-gigabyte daily data voucher. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a big hitter is coming for you at nordvpn.com/KIMBER right now. This video was made in partnership with Hit Wicket. Stick that game in your pocket now.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 40 of the Crickpicks podcast. I'm Behram Qazi, who you can find at deafmango on Twitter. And with me is Estelle Vasudevan, who you can find at Estelle_Vasudevan1 on Twitter. And as always, we've got Jarrod Kimber with us, who you can find absolutely everywhere. And if you're new to Crickpicks, what we do in this podcast is we take any generic cricket category and we draft our top 5 each for that category in a snake-style draft competition. So the pick order goes 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And the category for this particular episode is Best All-Format Female Batters in History. And out of all the ones that we're recording in bulk today, Jarrod and Estelle, this is the one I struggled on the most because not a lot of female cricketers have played test matches. So that was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. But I don't think you need to pick just people who play Test cricket. That's why we came up with this all formats. You can pick someone who's just played white ball cricket. I think you might have made this more hard on yourself than you needed to.
I probably did make this more harder on myself. But anyway.
So basically you're picking India, Australia and England.
Basically,
right?
I've got
an old New Zealand players from the 80s. So the reason that we made it all format is because it's not really, you can't really do best test players because there haven't been enough players and there haven't been enough test matches. And realistically, women's cricket is an all format style in the way that it has been played. Like at one stage, one day cricket was the most important. And then the next stage, T20 cricket was the most important. So if you don't do it all format, I think it's actually, it's not as interesting a topic. And then it makes you weigh up what you think. And in this case, it looks like me and Estelle are way ahead of the game because we worked out that most women are not going to play all 3 formats.
Yeah, well.
So, I asked you this when we were discussing it last time. That's why I knew that.
The players that I've picked are still quality.
We discussed this, Behram.
Behram's just forgotten what the actual discussion was.
Okay,
which is great because he screwed us over with the last Crickpicks. So it's good that he screwed himself over with this one.
Karmic justice strikes and, my list is still pretty strong, but I don't have first pick, so it does put me at a bit of a disadvantage. I believe, Estelle, you do for this one, and it's only fitting that the first ever strictly female Crickpicks podcast that we're doing is going to be spearheaded by a female herself.
Yeah, I don't think my top pick is going to be unanimous, but I think...
God. How can you stuff this up?
She's going to go rogue. We're getting another Dilhara Fernando.
This is the day that people recognize me as an imposter. I'm going with Meg Lanning.
Oh, that's all right. Jesus.
It's not a bad pick. I'm not saying it's a bad pick. What I meant was it's not unanimous, right? There will be people who say...
I don't think there is a unanimous one here, though, which is why I thought it was a really fascinating topic. I don't think there is a unanimous best female, but there's no Bradman, right?
And this is all time, by the way. It's not current, so we can pick from a pool of all female batters ever.
Yep.
Yeah, so Meg Lanning, I mean, her record is incredible, right? Forget about the titles. 15 ODI hundreds in 100 games. She's also got a couple in T20 cricket. Not, a great test record, but she has played only 6 games. So not much to speak of in that sense. But I think she's just such a great player, right? I think Jarrod and I did a piece on her a few months ago. And I think that was the first time I kind of really looked at Meg Lanning, the player. And just to look at what she's accomplished in such a short period of time. You'd think she's been around forever, but she didn't really have such a long career, right? Of course, she's retired now. We don't know whether she'll be back. She's won every title you could possibly imagine. And as a batter, there have been times I think she just looked unstoppable when she was going.
Only thing I
Yeah.
would challenge you over there on is her test average.
Yeah, I think it's 6 matches though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that's.
It's what, 30?
And it isn't
Yeah.
series either, right? It's like
No.
one test this year and then
If she plays 20 matches, I find it hard to believe she doesn't average plus 40 minimum, right? Like there's nothing in her technique that suggests she ever shouldn't have made runs in Test cricket. It's probably the thing that I'm kind of with Behram from of. I think she's the best women's batter I've ever seen. But because she didn't make runs in Test cricket, it's a bit of a pain for this particular thing that we've come up with here. But I don't think you made a mistake picking Meg Lanning. I thought you were going to pick, I don't know, someone random. I can't even think of who it's going to be. Of like
Amelia
Laura
Kerr.
Wolfart. I'm picking Laura Wolfart because she's got to be the best. I'm picking Marizanne Kapp because she's cool. Like you've gone. That's a good solid pick.
No. I mean, I don't have very regrets about picking Lanning. I believe she's the best batter I've seen as well. I just, it wouldn't be like a unanimous choice. I know there'll be kind of holes to pick out about, picking her as the number one pick.
All right. Well, the person who I think who has the biggest claim, if it isn't Meg Lanning, is Mitali Raj.
Yeah.
Of course. That's
so
what I thought would have been the obvious unanimous choice, honestly.
my kind of...
I don't know
I
if
had to pick
Mitali-
between the two of them.
The
I don't
only
know if
issue
Mitali
with
is
Mitali
obvious.
is strike rate in T20s, no?
Correct. And even one day cricket, like she could get stuck, right? And so I think for modern cricket, Meg Lanning was probably a better player, but I also think that Mitali Raj could have averaged 50 in all 3 formats. In or certainly 45 plus in all 3 formats without any big issues if she wanted to. I think she's technically almost as perfect a batter as I've ever seen. Her time to play each ball, I don't think I've ever seen a woman have as much time. I don't know if she ever played any men's cricket, but I'd be fascinated to see how she would go against men's cricket with faster bowlers because it felt like she just had so much more time than everyone else in women's cricket. She's an absolute legend. The problem with Mitali Raj is she had that issue of she played on too long and she played into the T20 generation. And so there'll be someone commenting going, well, Mitali Raj couldn't hit the ball off the square. And it's like, yeah, well, she didn't need to hit the ball off the square for like the first 18 years of her career. And then at the end she did, and she was old and she couldn't do it by that stage, but she was still a brilliant player. I think I'm a huge fan of both of them. I think I've got Mitali Raj's hat signed behind my head somewhere. So I probably prefer to watch Mitali than Meg, but I still think Meg should probably be number one.
Yeah, and
All right.
Mitali is also something you have to consider is the influence she's had, right? She's not Meg Lanning's generation. She's the previous generation. And I remember
She started playing in
reading...
the 90s, right? And you're still playing in the 2020s?
Yeah. And I remember someone did a piece for Cricket Monthly, I think, on Mitali. And when you read that, it's like every major name in Indian cricket now started because of her. And she's had an influence on each of their careers at some point, right?
Yeah.
So I think
She's got a
that is...
biopic as well, no?
Oh, yeah,
Does she?
she does.
I think she does. I haven't watched it.
Oh, I'm going to have to go find that one.
Yeah. So I think that's also an element that you should consider because people are going to talk about strike rates, but you have to understand that the era was kind of different, right? When she was at her best, that was a different era.
I can't wait for the Crickpicks on which players should have a biopic.
Yeah, that definitely should be. Shakib would be number one.
Oh my God, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Basil, we'd have to throw Basil D'Oliveira in there as well. And isn't there that? Do you know there's a Test cricketer? This is getting way out of hand, but there's a Test cricketer who played for. I think he played for South Africa. Who claims to have cured cancer by going on long walks. That guy. he's had the weirdest story. Abhishek Mukherjee's written about it before. That guy needs a movie made about it as well. But okay, no, I think we've done well with number 1 and 2, and let's see how Behram goes.
Don't think you guys have done too badly at all. Just to talk about Mithali, of course, she is the highest scorer ever in women's ODIs, 7,805 runs, and she scored that at an average of 50 plus. So, I mean, even if the strike rate isn't up to par in T20s, and in tests, like, the average is inflated by her 214, but still, anyone who's watched her bat would not challenge Jarrod's pick, I think. Okay, I'm going to go for 2 Australians, actually. One will be a golden oldie, and one will be a recent legend or living legend. So for number 1, I will go Karen Rolton, right? Left-handed bat, an absolute legend. And when I looked at her numbers, I was shocked, right?
You went
absolutely
Karen Rolton?
shocked. Yeah. Okay. Huh?
When you said golden oldie of Australian cricket, I think there's a really big name that you might have skipped here. I am absolutely shocked that you've picked Karen Rolton ahead of the other. But that's fine. Karen Rolton was a great player. There's no doubts. I don't think she's the 3rd best batter of all time, but that's a different conversation.
I'll be honest, I haven't really watched a lot of the legend that you speak of. I have her on my list, and Karen Rolton. But when I looked at the numbers, this is just phenomenal, right? She scored 1,002 runs in 14 tests at 55.6. And then in ODIs, she scored 4,814 runs at 48.14. Even in T20s, she's got 405 runs in 15 games, and her average is 50.62, and she's striking at 125 plus, which is quite high in women's cricket. So that to me, like, says or screams, in fact, all format supremacy. And because I was so hung up on the whole all format thing, I've gone for Karen Rolton as my number 1 pick. But yes, Jarrod, I understand that maybe, the other one was more iconic. She had the highest score ever, right, in ODI cricket for the longest time.
Yeah, I mean, look, Karen Rolton was absolutely is a great, and I don't think there's any issue with her being on any kinds of lists like this. She, absolutely. I remember for my book, so I've got a chapter on the women batters, the best women batters of all time. There's something about her record that that when you start to break it down, and I can't remember what it is, I can't remember if it was one days or tests, that that there was something in it that maybe wasn't as good as it should have been, and I can't even remember what that was now. But she's certainly, a great kind of over a couple of different eras in the way that she played all together. And how well she dominated. But that's right. She doesn't have so England were the best team she played against in one-day cricket, and she averages 37 against them. And so a lot of her runs are against the other sides. But I don't think that's like anything to worry about. But if you look at her record, it's quite interesting. She doesn't average over 40 in Australia, England, or India. Oh. She does average quite a lot in Ireland, New Zealand, and South Africa. I don't think that means that she's not. I think her numbers slightly flatter her. But the thing with women's cricket is we don't have as much footage and stuff to go back on. So when you're looking at it the way that you did, I think that there's nothing wrong with having her on this list.
Yeah, I mean, I would have gone for Mithali as my number 1 pick as well. But I might have gone Rolton over Meg just because I was so wowed by the numbers. Yeah, it looked unreal to me, but I should have dug deeper and clearly you make a lot of sense when you say that she didn't score a lot of runs versus the very best.
This is going to be the top 15 of all time. Karen Rolton is in the top 15 of all time. So you haven't made a mistake of putting her in the list.
Yeah. Next one is a very hot take. She's definitely going to be picked higher than she deserves to be picked. But she's my all-time favorite female cricketer of all time. And she's not even primarily a batter. She's an all-rounder. But I'm going Pez, Elise Perry as my pick number 2. Again, like in Test cricket, she's averaging 61.86 in 13 tests, scored 928 runs, 3,958 runs in 147 ODIs, and the average again is 50.74. T20s, I mean, that's probably her weakest format. She's averaging 31.3, has scored 1878 runs, and the strike rate isn't as flattering. And I mean, recently, you can make a case that Elise Perry perhaps is not quite attuned to modern cricket, but I'll maybe further my case over here by saying that she might be one of the biggest stars in cricket across genders, and I don't think any female cricketer has got the amount of coverage that Pez has gotten, and she is an out-and-out superstar. And I know this is a biased pick. Don't give me hell for it, people in the comments and you too, because I didn't want either of you to pick Elise Perry. I wanted her.
Her numbers are incredible, but
Yeah.
she basically just doesn't get out. And I know that sounds like, isn't that the job, Jarrod? But I promise you, when you look at her numbers, I've never seen anything like this. So she's played in 13 test matches and she already has 7 not outs, right?
Yeah.
In ODIs, 120 innings, 42 not outs. 30% of the time in ODI cricket, she's not out. T20 cricket, right? 97 innings, 37 not outs. Like, I think
That's
when you
crazy,
talk,
actually.
I've never seen a record I can't think of another cricketer in the history of cricket that has anything like that, male or female, that I've ever come across before. And I think there is an element of, this is going to sound really bad, but there's an element of Jadeja, Imran Khan, Daniel Vittori about her, in that I don't think she's at the same quality of batters as the other 3 that we've already mentioned.
Yeah.
But she has found a method that works for her, and no one in women's cricket can dismiss her. Right? And so actual batting skills, I think you could argue that she should probably still be in the top 10 without any issue. But I don't think you could argue that she's the 4th best batter in women's cricket ever.
Yeah.
But when you look at those numbers, you're like, well, if no one can get her out, that is like a big part of batting. And yes, someone like me can go, oh my God, she can't get off strike here. And why isn't she's big and massive. She should be slogging everyone for 4s and 6s. And I think you can make those arguments really, really easily when you look at her. But when it comes down to it, she won't go out. And she is the best not outer of any cricketer I think I've ever seen. And so, you know, it's hard not to do that. But I think if you look at raw numbers, she should be number 1, right? Like she should probably be number 1 on this list. But if you've watched her, and we've watched more, and this is the Karen Rolton thing and the Elise Perry thing in reverse, right? Yeah. We don't see a lot of the old players, whereas we see Elise Perry and like we have a real strong view on her as a player in a way that we haven't. But the part of the reason we have a real strong view on her is because she, along with Mitali Raj and Charlotte Edwards, changed women's cricket, right? They're the reason we have a strong view on them is because they were so good that we watched more cricket. So she's a fascinating one for me. And you say she's not good at T20 cricket. The last couple of years, she's suddenly got good at T20 cricket as well. So, which proves to me that you could kind of like, I don't know, send her a 5D Sudoku in Japanese and she'd work it out. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's something about her as an athlete. It's just like, oh, I have to do this now. I'll work it out.
Yeah. Also, Jarrod, unlike Jadeja and Imran, it's not like she bats in the middle or lower middle order. Elise Perry comes and bats up top plenty of times, right?
Yeah.
So if she's still getting those not outs, that's actually to her advantage.
She's batted everywhere in the order, but when I looked at the not outs, a lot of them still come from number 4. So I think she might have started at number 10 as well. So she's got. So it might sound like I'm slagging her off, but there is a little bit of that Ravi Shastri, Imran Khan, Daniel Vittori of. She just kept getting better and better. And part of the reason she was able to do that is she was in a professional environment quite early on and she was a freak athlete. But yeah, it's not, there's nothing wrong with that pick at all. But it does need to be put in context because she is the one of which is the weirdest, I think, of the modern crop to kind of work out.
Well, that's why we've got you here, right, to put things into context. But it's interesting how 3 Aussies have gone in the first 4 picks, and now we're back to you, Jarrod. And let's see if you can change things up a bit.
Okay. So, yeah, we have got a lot of Aussies. There's a couple of great older Australian players as well. But I'm going to go with the great New Zealand player, Debbie Hockley. So Debbie Hockley averages over 50 in Test cricket, and she averages 42 in ODI cricket. And sadly, just like is not mentioned at all anymore. And there's a lot of women with very good records when you go back, but they don't quite. Maybe they've got a good record in Test cricket or ODI cricket. And she absolutely shines out as someone who is there. I think. obviously Susie Bates is another conversation where she comes up. I think Susie Bates is absolutely fantastic, but I think Debbie Hockley is probably the greatest New Zealand player, batter, or maybe even cricketer that they've ever had. So I'm going to put her up there. Again, we don't have a lot of footage, but I did go through her record pretty much line by line again. And the women's records are really interesting in general when you start to go through them because of the way they played their series and everything else. But she averages 37 against Australia, but 45 against England. And she averaged over 50 in ODI cricket when she went to Australia and when she went to England.
Wow.
It's like there's a lot there. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes, as I said before, you can see the Karen Rolton thing and you're like, okay, she really cashed in against the worst players, which we're not saying that doesn't make her a great. We're picking between levels of greatness here. But with Debbie Hockley, I was like, I don't know. She looks pretty great every different way you look at it. So I'm more than happy to have her as my next pick. A very hipster pick there.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is very
I had
hipster
her
when
as
you
well. Yeah.
take into consideration that last bit that you told us that she's averaging over 50 in England and Australia. I mean, that is a spectacular stat. And I mean, if she's gone ahead of Susie and Amelia, makes sense to me.
Estelle, are we back with you?
Yeah. So I've
Estelle's
got
got back-to-back picks. I'm
Yeah, she
really
does.
excited about this.
picks. So I'll go with Belinda Clark. I think probably should have been higher on the list.
The original golden oldie.
The golden oldie that was ignored.
Because when he said golden oldie and current player, I was like, okay, golden oldie is Clark, and current player, I don't know who he's going to pick because, I mean,
I knew he was picking Perry. There was no doubt in my mind. But I actually in the spreadsheet, I had already written Belinda Clark in. I was once he said golden oldie, I was so confident it was Belinda Clark. I just wrote her name in.
I looked at the records, stacked together up against each other, and Rolton had better numbers.
I mean, with the Perry pick, I think it's definitely the test matches that swayed you because you were looking at the 3 formats, right?
Yes.
But anyway, back to Belinda Clark. I think majority of her games were ODIs. Highest score of 229, first double hundred in ODI cricket. So, I mean, that's pretty incredible. I know the opposition wasn't great, but I mean, it's still an incredible feat, right? And it came in a World Cup, if I'm not mistaken. Just an incredible kind of a trailblazer, right, for the game. Playing in the 90s, one of the most recognizable names, I would say. Again, I haven't followed the women's game very long. I probably got into it maybe 2013, 14. So I haven't seen much of her batting. But just looking at her record, it's very hard to look past someone who's made so much of runs. Played all 3 formats as well. Though she hasn't, I mean, she's played only one T20. But one of the most important players, I would say, in women's cricket.
Everyone's heard of Belinda Clark going unbeaten for 229, right? And up until very recently, I can't remember when Amelia Kerr broke that record, but, I did not know anything about women's cricket before Sana Mir happened to Pakistan, right? And you had just heard Belinda Clark's name. It was that synonymous with the sport. So definitely, I suppose maybe I missed a trick by not picking her, but I'm happy that she's finally been snapped up.
So she averages 46 versus England and 45 versus New Zealand. And she struggled a little bit in England, only averaging 37, but she averaged almost 50 in New Zealand again. Just, a crazy great career, of which, and when we're talking about players like Clark and Hockley specifically, and those sort of really older ones, you're talking about them knowing they're only going to play 3 games in for a month and then not play for ages. And the level of domestic cricket was nowhere near what international cricket was. It's one thing that when I was doing my list of the greatest women batters, it's like we can't if there's a woman who's played 15 tests who averages 60, right? I can't actually have a look at what she did in first class cricket because it wasn't considered first class cricket. Right. So I don't actually have the stats of what she might have done domestically. And there are guys, I forget who it is, but there's an English player around the late 1800s, early 1900s who averages 55 or 56 in Test cricket, but averages like 33 in first class cricket. Like, we know he probably just got on a good run in Test. We have no idea with women. There's nothing to back it up. And so Belinda Clark would play a couple of games and then not play a couple of games. And then so to be able to do that for what was her career was she did that over 14 years, but incredibly consistent. That's the thing with her. It's just the consistency that she amassed. She dominated bad teams, but she was really solid against the good teams as well. I just think she was a fantastic player. And I'm glad that Behram picked her as his first pick.
Is Belinda Clark where Rob Moody gets his moniker? Ro Belinda?
No, I think he's married to a Belinda.
Oh, okay. That would have been a fun story.
Yeah. But also, just in the history of women's cricket, she's really important. She's also quite interesting in the history of men's cricket because she becomes the person who runs the academy, right? Like she was an amateur in an era, like in the 90s, she prepared like a professional for women's cricket in a way that almost no one else did. So much so that when Australia needed someone to look after their academy, they brought Belinda Clark in. Like, she's on that level in Australia of respect within the game. And that hadn't existed before Belinda Clark. Like, there were good players, but they weren't thought of like that. And Belinda Clark was just like, we trust her. She thinks she's smart. She's a professional. We're going to get her in. That's not the Australian cricket way in general to look at someone like that. So I couldn't have any more respect for her. And I'm so glad that Behram took her with his first pick.
Yeah, this is my Dilhara Fernando moment.
Estelle's got another one.
Probably not, no? My next one is going to be, I mean, she's top 15, but I don't know whether I'm picking her a bit too high because I'm a bit biased. Probably it's not the player you guys are expecting. Probably one of my favorite cricketers ever, right? Susie Bates. I know people are going to look at her record now and look at her playing now and, not really think she's a great bat or she should be in the conversation with some of the players we've discussed. But she's an incredible talent, right? The way she's gone about things in a New Zealand team, particularly now when New Zealand is basically going downhill over the last couple of years. She's been incredible. She's an incredible leader, got a great record in ODI and T20 cricket. Just looking at her stats, 1300s in ODIs, 100 in T20 cricket, nearly 5,700 ODI runs, 4,300 T20 runs. So she's been one of those long-standing, top batters in the women's game. I also think she's struggling a little bit with the game where it's moving to now. But still, should be in the conversation as one of the best batters ever, right?
Did you see the podcast we did with her?
Yes, I did. I loved it.
I mean, she kind of talked about how the game had changed and she's still struggling to sort of, handle it. She basically said she was a front foot bully, right? And now you can't be a front foot bully because there's too many quick bowlers. So it's really interesting. I've got her she was in my top 10 of all time in the book as well. The interesting thing is, of course, that she never made any runs against England. And she also struggled against South Africa, which I found really, really interesting because you would think those are the two teams that were seam dependent and she's from New Zealand. Like it kind of, you would think that would be, but she averaged almost 40 against Australia and she played against the greatest Australian team that anyone's ever played against, right? Like, it's a phenomenal record when you look at it that way. And she also averages well over 40 against West Indies, who are probably one of the other best teams when she played. So it's a bit patchy when you start to break it down, but just sheer number of runs in... does she have the most runs in ODI women's history, I think?
No.
I think it's Mithali, right?
Yeah.
Oh, is it? And maybe she has the most in... She might have the most in women's cricket when it's T20.
Overall, probably.
Yeah.
I think she had most number of tons until Lanning went past her. So she has 13. Nobody else has 10 apart from Lanning.
No, I've got no problem with Susie Bates being in there. And I think she's a great cricketer all around. And also, I think her not being very good at basketball is the best thing that's ever happened to women's cricket in New Zealand.
I mean, not very good, but she made the Olympic team, didn't she?
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
But, sounded like she struggled a little bit, to defend the USA team. I don't know. I think that's the best thing that's ever happened to women's cricket. I mean, what
if you say
impact could she have
struggle
had in
to
women's
defend the
basketball?
USA team, I don't know if you could still say
Yeah,
that basketball.
I
think
expect
of it
Susie
this way.
Bates to be able to
Cricket,
turn
yeah.
water into wine, and I'm a little bit disappointed in her that she couldn't stop Lisa Leslie.
Yeah, think of it this way: that she was representing New Zealand at the Beijing Olympics, playing basketball in 2008, and then she
Yeah.
went on to score 13, ODI tons and one T20 ton as well. And she's got a ground named after her. So I don't think it was rogue at all. I think that it was time that Susie Bates got picked.
I wonder how many people on this list have grounds named after them, because Karen Rolton has a ground, and I wonder if Belinda Clark has a ground as well. So it's
She
weird that
probably has a
women.
stand, I think.
Yeah, I think she does.
I think that there's this weird, because there aren't that many grounds named after male cricketers. It's not really a thing, and yet recently it seems to be a thing of like, oh, that's right, women play cricket too. And it's really interesting to me that we're suddenly starting to see that. All right, so Susie Bates, I like that. We've missed a couple of the great England players at this stage. I'm going to go Charlotte Edwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, Charlotte Edwards is one of those players who I think by the time we all watched her play, she was probably well and truly past her best. And so if you looked at her at the end, she looked a little bit ropey. But the issue was that, like, I think she broke the world record for the most runs in an ODI, like 2 games before Belinda Clark made the double 100. And I think she was still a teenager when she did that, Charlotte Edwards. And so she then played for a generation, and she ends up becoming the stodgy player that we kind of remember later on in her career. But she was absolutely fantastic. And she's a big reason why women's cricket was taken so seriously in England, because she was well known. Like, she was a name. Like, I didn't know much about England women's cricket when I came over to the UK. Charlotte Edwards is a name that kept coming up, right? Like, it was the name that people spoke about. And so she really did that. And she did that when you look at her career through, eventually it was winning the World Cup. But it actually really starts with just how much better she was with the bat than everyone else. And so I think she definitely needs to be on this list. She made 1,600 runs in Test matches, almost 6,000 runs in ODIs, and added another 2,600 in T20s. Like, it's a lot of cricket, right? Yeah. And you look at the range of which when she started. I think she played her first ODI in '96. First international in '96 and her last international in 2016. So it's a proper 20-year career, and of which she played like 80% of it amateur, and quite often as the leader as well. Like, there's a lot of pressure on her as a player, and I thought she was fantastic.
I mean, she's played 23 Test matches. I don't think we can count very many female cricketers who've played 23 Test matches, and she's averaging.
There's a couple
44.
of the older women that I think are in the high 20s. I don't think Estelle might remember this, but I don't think there's any in the 30s. Well, this is where we need Hypercost in the comments. Like we need to live record with him for this particular topic. But yeah, there aren't. You're right. It's just not a thing that women do. And yet she still managed to get as many Test matches as she did, which just I think tells you a lot.
And she's averaging 44 plus in Test cricket, and she has the second most ODI runs ever, 5,992. She got them at an average of 38.16, and even the T20 numbers are pretty decent. She's averaging 32.97. Strike rate isn't as good; it's 106, but still, you have to look at the era and everything, and kind of consider the fact that she was playing cricket since '96.
It was a bit like Mithali, right? Where she maybe played a couple of years too long.
Oh, definitely.
Then by that point, people were like, why is she still in the team? And, and that was the time when cricket was getting a lot of attention, right? On television and stuff. Because when I started following cricket, like women's cricket, Charlotte Edwards, Mithali Raj, and probably Elise Perry were the 3 biggest names. But Edwards was on the way down by that time.
Yeah. Okay, my turn again, and I'm gonna follow the same.
How are you gonna blow this?
Yeah, no. I'm gonna do well this time. I have a feeling, but I'm gonna follow the same format of one golden oldie and one modern day legend, or someone who I really love at least. And this golden oldie will definitely check out because she is a legendary English batter who was the face of women's cricket back in the day. I mean, she was women's cricket, really. And she played for 22 years, 1960 to 1982, amassed 1,594 runs in 22 test matches, averaged 45.54, and she scored 643 runs in 20 ODIs as well, at an average of 58.45. She's definitely someone who elevated the profile of women's cricket in England, and that's how I came to know of her as well, because they've got like an award named after her, and every now and then you'll have a segment on her. And then she also led her team, which was England, to a World Cup win in the inaugural tournament back in 1973, which interestingly enough preceded the men's ODI World Cup. Talking about Rachel Hayhoe Flint.
It's also worth saying, if you're going to say that, she invented the World Cup.
Yeah. And
like
what a
it
name.
Was literally... Yeah, like so she literally invented the World Cup and then went and won it, which is the most baller move that anyone's ever done in cricket. Yeah. No, I mean, look, I went with Charlotte Edwards because I think Charlotte Edwards, for me, is probably still a slightly better batter than Rachel Hayhoe Flint. But if we're doing women's cricket legends, Rachel Hayhoe Flint is the WG Grace of women's cricket, and was a fantastic player. There's all these weird records that she has of like, I don't know, first sixes hit and all these different things that she did along the way. She just kept breaking records. And I think she had something like 20% more runs than anyone else when she, 20 or 30% more runs than anyone else when she retired or something. Like it's just, her whole career just sounds made up from a different era. And she was an absolute superstar.
Yeah. And I mean, you just keep want to continue saying that name, right? Rachel Hayhoe Flint. It's just it's got a ring to it, and it is iconic, very, very iconic. And I mean, of course, you could call her the mother of women's cricket. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's what I said. The WG Grace, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, that's exactly what she did. Women's cricket wasn't spoken about, and she made it spoken about, and. You know, she would write articles on the game she was in. She invented a whole tournament that is now $1 billion industry, right? Like that is on the back of her.
And wasn't she the first female cricketer to become a member of the MCC, if I'm not wrong?
Yes. I mean, I think there was 2 or 3 that were brought in at the same time. But yeah, your general point is, she was in that first group that came in. I mean, she's so well respected in cricket. There's no doubt about that.
All right, my next pick is hipster. Maybe she wouldn't even have made your list at all, but maybe, I mean, I think she's probably one of the best batters going around currently. She's not played an awful lot, and she is an explosive, left-handed opening batter. I'm going to India, and I'm going for Smriti Mandhana. And Estelle's face says a lot over here now. Yeah, but I mean, look at her record across formats as well, right? 629 runs in 7 test matches. She's averaging 57 plus. She's got 3,585 runs in ODIs, and she's averaging 45 plus. And in T20s, she's got 3,493 runs. So if you combine her T20 and ODI runs, that's 7,000 plus. That's a lot of runs. And her average might be 28.86 in T20s, but her strike rate is, 122 plus. And anything 120 plus when it comes to strike rate for female cricketers, I believe, is quite explosive. And she's still 28. She's in the form of her life, hasn't put a foot wrong all year, right? She's just been in prolific touch. And Can
I throw a monkey wrench in here? What if she Babar Azam's or Manas Labuschane's?
Yeah, I mean, she could. But then again, like, there were a bunch of these
If she stopped now with her numbers, she's not far off this list, though, is she?
Yeah. Not far off, but I don't know if she's very much I think she'll end her career as one of the greatest ever, but I don't know if she's there yet.
Yeah, I mean, it is debatable, but I had like a bunch of these current stars in my list, and I wanted to pick the one that I like most, and Smriti is someone who I absolutely love, watch, bat, right? And now are we back? No, we're back to Jarrod, because I have a guess on what Estelle's last pick would be.
Oh, okay. I am going to. I'm just having a look at my list to see who we haven't put in yet. I'll go Stefanie Taylor. I was actually, I wouldn't say shocked, because I know how good she is, and I've been covering her since 2012. But I was actually shocked how good her pure batting numbers were when I went through it. I don't think I had her on my original list as a top 10 women's player of all time. And then suddenly going through it, I was like, she has to be on this list. She's so incredible as a player. So yeah, so I've got her there. Love watching her play as well. And there was a lot of times when it felt like for West Indies, it was kind of like you get her out.
Yeah.
And that's not a slight on Matthews or Dotton, but you kind of get Stefani out, and it's like that. Everything else is luck, right?
And
Whereas
she's got
with her,
something in the closet that Mithali and Smriti don't, which is a World Cup trophy.
Yes. No, that's fair. So, no, I just think she was a fantastic player. And again, one of those players that would have been great if she played any test matches. It would have been interesting to see how it transferred over, her and Susie Bates.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
another one who has kind of, if you just start following cricket, you're probably not picking, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
Stefani's kind of fallen off a cliff, almost her form. I think a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, a back injury. She's got a lot of issues with physically, but she was going to be my next pick because an incredible player. And like you said, I think you also have to put into context the team she plays for, and the weight kind of that she carried during that era, right? When she was at her best.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a one-dimensional batting line. I mean, it was her and Dotton, but she was the star batter, right? Like it'd be really interesting, and I've never done it, to compare her career to sort of Lara's. How much the both of them just had to. It's basically you make runs or your team loses, and the pressure of that is immense. And I think she carried it brilliantly.
Yeah, no, agreed. All right, Estelle, you're wrapping things up, right?
I've got two, right?
Yeah,
So
double
that
tap.
will
What's your
be-
final two picks?
Yes. So I'm going with Nat Silverbrunt.
Oh,
I think she's at the
She's got a-
moment also. Yeah, she's got an incredible record, and she's one of those players who you're going to lose if she bats on, right? Because she's got the power, she's got she's able to kind of rescue England when they're in tough situations. She's got that all round game. I know probably would be considered like higher up in an all-rounders list, but
Yeah.
as a pure batter, I think she's one of the most dangerous batters in the game at the moment. It's her game, and the era she's playing in has really, it suited her the time she's playing, right? She has 3,676 runs in ODIs, 2,500 in T20s, averaging 47 plus in ODIs and 43 plus in tests. So only 10 tests at the moment, but 10 hundreds overall across the format. So I think definitely one of the best batters I've watched playing, one of the most dangerous batters I've watched.
Yeah, she has that clutch element to her. She was high up on my list. One English batter, though, was higher up the list than Nat Silver. But I'm quite happy to see her make it, and I think it makes sense. And she's the second all-rounder to make the batters list.
yeah. And look, I don't think. Well, I mean, Charlotte Edwards and Susie Bates bowled as well, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
there is an element of there's more all-rounders in women's cricket. It's really interesting for me. I think one of the biggest disappointments in her international record is probably her T20 record.
Yeah.
But you look at her in the WPL and the 100, and it's like her numbers in those are just obscene. And her record compared to everyone else. So I think there's definitely a big element of like maybe internationally in T20 she hasn't quite lived up to where she should be. But yeah, she's definitely I had her as a fringe top 10, which is kind of exactly where we've got her. So I think that probably is best.
Checks out.
Okay.
Final pick
last
for
pick.
Estelle.
Yeah.
Will she do it, Jarrod? Is she going there?
No, I'm not.
Oh, she's not. What a disappointment.
Should we pick just only Sri Lankans after this now?
I would love to pick a Sri Lankan, but I'm not going to. I'm going with Laura Woolward. I think again
She's like 12. She's a fetus.
Yeah, so okay.
It's
so
too soon. No, well, I picked Smriti. What can I even say?
Yeah, she has more runs than Smriti in ODIs, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yes. She does.
Right,
Laura
she
has
does.
got
And she's
4,000
25 years old.
Yeah, 4,148 runs already in 98 ODIs.
Right.
She's averaging
Yeah.
49
And
plus,
hasn't
and
played
she's
even
20 what?
100, right? She's
24, you
25 years
said?
old.
Wow,
25,
years old.
right?
Crazy.
Will probably play one or two tests here and there, so that's going to add to her tally. She already, I mean, three tests and 100 already.
Yes.
And you do remember, like the test games that South Africa play are always going to be against better opposition, right? They're going to play India, England, or Australia. 8
She
ODI hundreds,
batted
one T20 100.
forever. She batted
The
forever in that
only issue
innings.
is the strike rate, right? The
Yes.
in ODIs particularly, it's in the 70s, but I think she's been better in the last couple of years. And what was it, 180 something she made against Sri Lanka? She's another one who carries a lot of kind of weight on her shoulders for South Africa's batting, right? And I think just if you look at the ceiling and the talent she's got, uh, I think she's in that 13 to 15 kind of range in the best batters we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is she's definitely, as far as talent, probably in the top 10 of all time already. Her record isn't quite there just because she's so young. But the thing that is going to be interesting, where she ends up is going to be based on her strike rate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's say she plays 20 test matches and she averages 45, right? Which is, she's more than capable of doing that. If she averages 45 in ODI cricket or even 50 in ODI cricket, but she does it at a strike rate of 75 to 80, that is going to hold her back. And she's not a particularly great T20 player either, especially when it comes to strike rate. So I think as a technician, she's almost top 5 of all time. Like I would have her up there with Lanning and Mitali Raj, I think on that level. But I don't know if she has the ability to adapt to the game as it is currently being played. And as it becomes more of a T20 game, where does she fit in if she's not that kind of player? But technically, there's no doubt. I mean, I had her at the end of my list as well.
Same.
But
Absolute end of
I
my
just wanted to
list.
make fun of Estelle, really.
She was bookending my list. And look, I am a big fan of the Wolf. Cover drive to die for, right? So aesthetically pleasing. I would even say that she is already a living legend, even if she's still 25. That 100 that you speak of that came in that test versus India was a very dogged knock. She batted forever in that innings. And South Africa had a shot at saving that game as well. And her ODI record is splendid. Of course, the strike rate is an issue, but if you're averaging nearly 15 ODIs and, close to 36 in T20Is as well, I mean, at least what she gives you is bulk runs. And you know that you'll always get that with Laura Wolfart. So it's not the worst pick in the world, but she was bookending my list at the bottom.
All right. I am going to finish off with a player who is controversial, and I'm not sure if either of you will know that she's controversial. I'm assuming both of you found this record out, though. So there's an Australian woman called Denise Annetts who played in the 80s.
I did.
Who, in 10 test matches, averages, what does she average, Behram?
81.9 in 13 test innings.
81.9. In ODI cricket, she played 43 matches and averages about 41, 42. I've been through her record many, many times. And her ODI record's probably the more fair one to go through because obviously she played quite a bit more. She has the funniest record. England was the best team she played against, and she averages 50 against them in ODIs. Ireland, she played 6 times and averages 25. And New Zealand, who were a good team, but not quite on the level as England all that time, she averages 36. So the best team she went up against in ODI cricket, she absolutely slaughtered, right? But she did make almost all of her runs at home. She averaged over 54 at home, and I think it's about 37, 36 away from home. So there is an element of that. But she's also controversial. Now, do either of you know why she's controversial?
No.
No, I don't.
I'm going to read this out to you. This is from a Wikipedia page. And I tried to find more and more information about this. I already knew about this because I remember it happening at the time. But I tried to find more information about this, and it's weirdly not out there. In January 1994, she claimed her omission from the Australian team was because she was not a lesbian. The Australian Anti-Discrimination Board could not investigate the complaint as the discrimination law only protected homosexuals at the time. That is one of the wildest Wikipedia things of all time. And you do look at it and you're like, well, wait a minute, she was averaging all these runs. I just wonder if she was a great player at home, and they had a lot of players in that era. They would have had a lot of all-rounders. It would have had a lot of players averaging it, probably around 40, and everything else. And I have no idea. I know that having talked to other women, they thought that claim was absolute nonsense. But that is something that she said. But it is hard to overlook her record if she's averaging 80 in 10 test matches and she's averaging 50 against the best opposition that she goes up against in ODI cricket. I don't think we could argue that Denise Annetts was not a great player. Even if I think... I'm going to put it as diplomatically as possible. I don't think, forget that claim, but I don't think she was the most popular member of the team. And I think there was definitely an element that there was a lot of people who already didn't like her. And maybe, I don't know, I can't remember if she had a form slip or whatever it was towards the end. But my memory was she was still making runs towards the end. But I think there was a lot of issues with her. So she might be, are you guys ready for this? The Kevin Peterson of women's cricket.
Oh,
Yeah,
Hey?
well,
Hey?
that's an
Because she's literally saying that the homosexuals have taken over the team. Remember KPC? And then in her prime, she's kicked out of the team.
Yeah.
It's hard being Denise Annetts in this locker room, is all I'm going to say.
And she played only for 8 years, right? It's not an extremely long career, 85
I've
to
got-
93.
I don't know if it's in her Wikipedia page. I remember someone telling me she was a great hockey player as well. There was another sport that she was also really, really good at. It's not in a Wikipedia, as I said, so I don't know. But that she was just a terrific athlete is one of the things that I was told about her. But yeah, very controversial, weird one. Did either of you know anything about that? Like, did I just blow your minds?
I had her on my list, and she was even high up on my list because of the 81.9 test average, and even in ODIs it was 41.7. But I was like, what will I even say? How do I talk to this? So I was like half hoping that you'd take her, and you did.
Yep.
I usually do this whenever I have one of these, extremely old picks. I leave them for
confusing one. It's like, I'll let Jarrod. Jarrod is probably going to talk
Yeah.
about that one.
Yeah. It's a bit
Behram,
of a
you finish
trend.
us off.
Yeah, so I'm really confused, guys. There is both of the people that I'm thinking of who are kind of like up against each other in my head. They're both active cricketers. One is the English or current English captain. And then there is also a left-handed Australian batter who has an exceptional record thus far. And it is a tough one. It is an extremely tough one. I would toss a coin really if I could. But you know what? I'm going to go Beth Mooney over Heather Knight. And I know Heather has been playing for longer, but Beth Mooney's numbers, it's just beyond phenomenal when you look at this stuff. She is an explosive left-hand bat, so she's got, clearly I have a type, Smriti, and then now Beth Mooney as well.
I
And,
thought you were going to say Beth Mooney earlier when you said explosive opening left-hander.
Yeah, I thought that's what he was going to say. I was a bit surprised he went the other direction.
But anyway, 2,380 runs in 74 ODIs. She's averaging 51.73, which is immense. Even in T20, she's got 2,829 runs, and she's averaging 41. And wait for it, at a strike rate of 123 plus. That is insane. And she's played 7 tests as well.
If you look at her in the competitions, thankfully Cricinfo now have all those stats up. She's got a strike rate in the 100 of 138, a strike rate in the WPL of 139, and the Women's Big Bash of 124. Like, there's just no way of breaking it down and not thinking she's incredible. I love Heather Knight. I think she's been a fantastic cricketer. I just don't think that she gets out. And the problem with Beth Mooney is she's 30, and really, if you compare it to Laura Wolfart or Mandana, she doesn't have as many runs as she probably should have scored at the age of 30. But that's only because Australia had greats that she had to overcome to get into the side.
Yeah.
I think if she'd played earlier, we'd be talking about someone with 6,000 or 7,000 runs and a similar record. I a bit like Laura Wolfart, I would find it very hard to say she's not in the best 5 batters I've ever seen in women's cricket. I think she's just at that level. It's just that she hasn't played as much. But yeah, I think she's the best batter in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's particularly all that close to her. When you Siva Brunt's probably the only one. And I just think she's a better player than Siva Brunt, as great as Nat is.
Yeah, I mean, she's only played 7 tests thus far, but her average checks out over there as well, 37.75. Hopefully she can get an opportunity to increase it. And yeah, pound for pound, I'd take her over Heather Knight any day of the week, right? That's why I picked her.
Well, you didn't, because you very nearly took Heather Knight. A minute ago, you were saying it was a
I mean,
coin
Heather Knight-
toss-up, and now you're saying pound for pound, I'd take her 100 times out of
Heather
100.
Knight, Heather
Five
Knight has
times
the
out of 10,
defendability
you mean.
factor, right?
Five times out of 10, I would take
times out of
Beth
10.
Mooney out of Heather Knight.
But here's the catch, right? With Beth Mooney, you get explosivity. With Heather Knight, she's super dependable and she's a leader. But I don't think I'd still take explosive over dependable, I suppose.
I think
so
Heather
we've
Knight
got-
can be explosive as well.
At
but
times.
Yeah, but Mooney
Great sweeper.
I
She
would
sweeps
pick
really well.
Mooney above Smithy as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, like Jarrod said, it's weird that she had. I mean, looking at her record, I was surprised that she has. She has so few runs, right? Because it seems like she's been in this purple patch for like
so long now.
3 or 4 years. But yeah, she has to make it into the top 15, right? She's a really good player and has been, like I said, and you have to also consider, I think that, she opens in T20 cricket, but she bats in the middle order in ODIs, right?
Yeah.
In a batting order like Australia have, where you don't get a lot of opportunities if you're low down the batting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she probably got fewer runs than she should have just by not being an
Yeah.
opener in both. I think that's probably fair. Okay, we've got our full lists. I've got Jeanette Britton is one.
Yeah. She was in mine as well.
Then there's a few really great older players, which is hard because they didn't play a lot of matches. Also, I should say Jeanette Britton, she's the one I was thinking of before. She's played the most tests in women's cricket history. She's played 27 tests and I think has a really high average in those.
She's
I can't
averaging
remember.
49.61, so nearly 50.
That's pretty good. Pretty good. There's Myrtle McLagan, who I like saying because of her name. There's Betty Snowball, who I like saying
You said that
because
you're
of
going
her
to
name.
pick her, right? Didn't he say he's going to pick her?
Look,
That's why he suggested this.
I did all this
episode.
just to the whole thing is just so I could eventually mention Betty Snowball and Myrtle McLagan. No, but I think there are some very great earlier players. It's just hard because you look at Jeanette Britton. She has played the most test matches ever, and it's still 27. And so it's really there isn't that much. There really just isn't that much that you can look at. One of my favorite players, I couldn't fit her in, and it's partly because her career wasn't long enough. But Claire Taylor was really the person who made me fall in love with cricket, and I know Claire a little bit, and she is absolutely one of the most vicious people you'll ever meet in conversation. She is so cutting and sarcastic. I don't think she's ever talked to me without insulting me. Ever. And she's an absolute legend. I'll get her on the podcast one day. I want to talk to her about batting. But and she's a really interesting one in the history of women's cricket, because women's cricket before, you had that sort of Charlotte Edwards technically correct Mitali Raj type players, and Claire Taylor is she's almost like the Ijaz Ahmed, except even better. That's a deep cut there, but she's got this weird technique, and it's completely homespun, and yet she was a brilliant player, but probably doesn't play for long enough. Estelle, is that fair?
Yeah, I think so too. I had her kind of on my long list as well. I had Sarah Taylor as well. I thought she was one of England's better batters during that era, wasn't she? But I wouldn't put her above someone like Siva Brunt. Amy Satterthwaite is another one who I thought
very good player.
probably should have got a mention. One of the, more aesthetically pleasing batters to watch. I think in terms of importance, I think Atapattu is another one who probably is someone we should talk about, because like Sarah Taylor, like Stefani Taylor, Sri Lanka is very, very, very was very, very dependent on her. I think she's kind of changed the game for Sri Lanka in a lot of aspects. So in terms of importance to a team, probably up there, but record-wise, I don't think she makes the 15. So those three are the ones who I thought were kind of on the fringe in my top 5.
I have one question for you, and I don't know if you know much about her, but she's a cricketer I don't know a lot about, but I came up about when I was doing my research for my book, is Sanjay Agarwal. I almost pronounced it incorrectly, who is a legend of Indian women's cricket in the 80s and 90s. So she averages 50 in 13 test matches, doesn't do as well in the ODIs, only averages 30. Do you know much about her? Is she considered a great, or is her record kind of not
No,
respected?
I don't know much about her, actually. I was just apart from the numbers that we see. Yeah.
Yeah.
When
No,
I was
J-
doing
J-
my research, I came across names that I'd never heard before, right? Denise Annetz was
Yeah.
one of them. Jeanette Britton was also one of them. But then there were some obvious ones as well, which kind of didn't make the cut. Not so obvious, of course, because it's only top 15. But like Adapattu is definitely like iconic
Yep.
and so important to Sri Lankan cricket. And in recent times has been so successful that she definitely had a case, I believe. Even though like probably top 20 she makes it, I feel. Amelia Kerr misses out, right? Of course, she was there. Heather Knight is there. And yeah, that's pretty much it though. If you're thinking
Oh,
top
there's
15.
another one.
Who do you say is the best Pakistani batter ever?
Oh,
Because
that's
like
Bisma?
they hardly get mentioned, right?
Bisma Maroof, or if not her, Javeria Khan. Yeah, has to be
one
of
other
those two.
old great name I forgot to mention before too is Enid Bakewell,
Oh yeah.
who was a fantastic cricketer, mostly in tests, but did okay in ODIs as well.
Rachel Haynes, but does she count? Because she batted everywhere, right? But she
Honestly,
has a good record.
There's a certain point at which you could like have like about 12 extra
Yeah. You could have
Australians.
15 Australians.
I think there's so many of the modern era that we haven't even mentioned their names,
Yeah.
right? And that they're absolutely, without any doubt, great players.
Blackwell is
But
another one, right?
Yeah.
yeah, Alex Blackwell was the one I was just thinking of like she's a perfect example. But there were so many that they almost cannibalize each other. I mean, you talked about Jeanette Britton before, and you said that you didn't know who she was. She played with Rachel Hayho Flint, right? And sometimes if you get overshadowed by someone else, and I think there's a lot of Australian women that probably had that happen to them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with
Also-
Haynes, it was that again she couldn't break into the side, right? Because they had Lisa Staleka, they had Blackwell, Alex Blackwell, they had a lot of players in that middle order, and Haynes just couldn't break in.
Yeah. What's the Scottish female cricketer's name, Jared? The one who's really, really good? Catherine Bryce, is it?
Catherine Bryce.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She was there. Laura Delaney, perhaps. I mean, I'm taking names of other good female batters at this point. Kiran Baloch from Pakistan has the highest ever score in a Test match, 242. Even though I'm sure she wasn't top 20 material. But like, it's interesting that we've done this because for someone who got into women's cricket very late in life and is now kind of developing a taste for it more and more so every single day or every passing day, I felt like this was a really interesting podcast to do because this particular one out of the 4 that we're recording today was the one I had to do most research for as well.
No, that's fair. I think this one was easy for me because I'd written a whole chapter on it in my book. But it was, as I said before, I found it one of the hardest chapters in the book to write because how do you compare Enid Bakewell to Stefani Taylor? Like they didn't play the same format of cricket. Like it's so different. And in the chapter on women's cricket, there's quite a bit on Michael Bevan because I'm right about like. It's easy for us to go, well, this woman was really good in ODI cricket, so she'd be really good in Test cricket. And it's like, but what if she wasn't? What if she's like Dhoni or Bevan and she, if she's like Dhoni and she's fine, or if she's like Bevan and it doesn't work? Like, we don't know any of this. Like, and it's such an interesting thing. And then you've got that sort of the amateur period and then the professional period and that period in the middle. It's a really, really confusing one from that point of view. But I found it really fascinating and I love going through it. And it's just a shame there isn't, you can go back to like Jack Hobbs and look at clips of Jack Hobbs batting on YouTube, right? Like there are clips of WG Grace batting on YouTube, and we don't have some of the great England women players playing in any sort of close-ups from their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Same with the Australian and the New Zealand players. There's just nothing. They just completely played in the darkness, and we're looking at a scorecard trying to work. And we have no idea if the bowling attack was any good that day. Was that the flattest pitch of all time? We don't know enough.
Yeah, and also, of course, you asked us to do this because you needed an excuse to say Myrtle McLagan, which honestly is like the cooler version of the name Mitchell McClenaghan. It's like you've ruined Myrtle McLagan and made it Mitchell McClenaghan.
I mean, what is the better name out of Enid Bakewell, Betty Snowball, and Myrtle McLagan? Like that is incredible high-level names, and I almost feel bad that we pick people like Debbie Hockley and Belinda Clark when we had these these players have great records. We could have put them in, but if we do
throw in Rachel Hayho Flint into that because she's got the Hayho factor.
Yeah,
So-
but I would say one day if we ever do a great name 11, I do think women's cricket is a very good place to find some excellent names. I mean, we're all gonna be running for Nixon McLean and Colin McCool. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot more Enid Bakewells out there than you would believe.
Yeah. Anyway, let us know in the comment section who we missed and who you would have had in the top 15.
Have I read out the list?
Oh,
I don't
you
think I read
haven't
out the list.
actually.
Quick.
Yeah, read out the lists.
Estelle went Meg Lanning, Belinda Clark, Susie Bates, Nat Siverbrunt, Laura Wolfart. I went Mitali Raj, Debbie Hockley, Charlotte Edwards, Stefani Taylor, Denise Annette, sorry. And Behram went Karen Rolton, Elise Perry, Rachel Hayho Flynn, Dimitri. I can't read my own writing.
Dimitri Mandana.
I've made it so small. And is there ever been a Dimitri in cricket? At least there's been Dennis's.
Dimitri Mascarenhas.
Of course. See, do you know what? That's so funny because I've never called him Dimitri. I always call him Dimmy, right? Anyway, Mandana, Beth Mooney. That was the full list. So tell us who you think have won. Behram, yours is looking a little shaky there.
I agree.
Mine, I think Estelle should win this.
Yeah.
If you go Lanning, but then she's got Bates at 3. Oh, that's it. Do you know what? I don't know who will win this one. It's a fascinating one.
We'll let the people decide. And also just a quick reminder to all of our listeners and viewers, you can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage. It can prove to be your one-stop shop for all the work that we do as part of this team, whether it be written content, podcasts, or videos. We'll be back soon enough with another episode of Crickpicks. Until then, you guys have a good one. That'll be all. Goodbye.
If you make any content, Minvo Pro is the tool for you. Take your long format content and cut it and slice it for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Minvo.pro now.